Hey, GCC family, welcome back to our Daily Devo. I'm Pastor Billy, and we have been diving into the book of John each day, doing a little bit at a time. And the past 3 days we spent in John chapter 1, each day doing a little bit. And today we're going to be in John chapter 2, and we're actually going to do all of John chapter 2. It's a pretty brief chapter, and so we're going to do it all in one day. And as always, I pray and I hope that you are getting a lot out of this. I hope this is helping you grow in your relationship with God, that you are taking this time as we do these devos and just asking God to speak to you through them. Even praying before you watch this, I would encourage you to do that. And also, I would encourage you to share it as well on Facebook with other people. And you know, my hope and my prayers are always that people would get a lot out of this, and this would draw them closer to God. And so, also leave your comments. I love reading those. Love seeing the feedback. Thank you for that. And all right, let's get into John chapter 2 today. All right, John chapter 2. Let's read that. Verse 1. On the third day, a wedding took place in Cana in Galilee. Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine was gone, Jesus' mother said to him, "They have no more wine." "Woman, why do you involve me?" Jesus replied. "My hour has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Nearby stood 6 stone water jars, the kind used by the Jews for ceremonial washing, each holding from 20 to 30 gallons. Jesus said to the servants, "Fill the jars with water." So they filled them to the brim. Then he told them, "Now draw some out and take it to the master of the banquet." They did so, and the master of the banquet tasted the water that had been turned into wine. He did not realize where it had come from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew. Then he called the bridegroom aside and said, "Everyone brings out the choice wine first, and then the cheaper wine after the guests have had too much to drink. But you have saved the best till now." What Jesus did here in Cana of Galilee was the first of the signs through which he revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. After this, he went down to Capernaum, and his mother and brothers and his disciples there, they stayed for a few days. Verse 13. When it was almost time for the Jewish Passover, Jesus went up to Jerusalem. In the temple courts, he found people selling cattle, sheep, and doves, and others sitting at tables exchanging money. So he made a whip out of cords and drove all from the temple courts, both sheep and cattle. He scattered the coins of the money changers and overturned their tables. To those who sold doves, he said, "Get these out of here. Stop turning my Father's house into a market." His disciples remembered that it is written, "Zeal for your house will consume me." The Jews then responded to him, "What sign can you show us to prove your authority to do all this?" Jesus answered them, "Destroy this temple, and I will raise it again in 3 days." They replied, "It has taken 46 years to build this temple, and you are going to raise it in 3 days?" But the temple he had spoken of was his body. After he was raised from the dead, the disciples recalled what he had said. Then they believed the scripture and the words that Jesus had spoken. Now, while he was in Jerusalem at the Passover festival, many people saw the signs he was performing and believed in him. But Jesus would not entrust himself to them, for he knew all people. He did not need any testimony about mankind, for he knew what was in each person. Okay, so we have 2 different situations, 2 different scenarios, 2 different experiences that we see Jesus having. The first we see 2 encounters, however we want to phrase it, but we see Jesus at a wedding with his disciples, and his mom is there. And one thing I think we can take out of this is, we are supposed to follow Jesus' example. However, I would never suggest that we do what Jesus did and refer to his mother as woman. Okay, that is a dangerous, dangerous thing. That terrifies me, thinking of calling my mother woman. Jesus, he can do things that we can't. That's one of them. But in all honesty, what we see here is his first miracle done. Jesus turning water into wine. He's at this celebration, this wedding, and he does this miracle, but it required people being obedient. Mary told the servants, do whatever he tells you to do. He has them bring the barrels to him, and they had to do that for him to do the miracle. And the thing is, miracles don't usually happen without obedience first. When we want God to do a miracle, a lot of times it's going to require us to be obedient to something. It's going to require us to be obedient, to trust him, to follow him, to go where he's asking us to go, to do what he's asking us to do, whatever. There's always going to be an obedience factor when God does miracles. And then we see Jesus make his way to the temple. And man, we see a different Jesus here than most of the Bible, most of the Gospels. This is a different Jesus. He's flipping tables. He makes a whip out of cords, and he's driving out the animals, the sheep and the cows and the cattle. And, he's driving them out with this whip. He's whipping things. He is flipping tables, and he is calling people out. And wow, we see a different kind of Jesus. We see that he has this passion for his Father's house, the temple. And Jesus is asked to provide proof of his authority. And he tells them, he says that he will tear this temple down and raise it in 3 days again. And what he is speaking of is his body, speaking of his death and resurrection that was to come. He's speaking in the future. A prophetic word is what he's given there, what's going to happen. And there are a couple things that, as we read this chapter, 3 things that stood out to me that I think we can take away from this. One is that Jesus was aware of timing. When Mary first came to him asking him to help out with the situation at the wedding, he said, my time has not come yet. He was aware that there was a specific timing for his life and for what he was going to do and for the miracles he was going to do. He was aware of those things. He was aware of the timing in it, and timing being everything. And I think that's a crucial thing, because even now, in the world we're in, the situation we are in right now, in March of 2020, and with the coronavirus going on and everything, and I think we have to remember that God's timing is always right. God's timing is perfect, and that God does have time set for certain things. And so I know my prayer, I'm praying for this to all be done and healed, and us to be back together and in church. But I think it's important to remember that there is a timing that Jesus is aware of. The second thing we see is that he had a righteous anger. We talk about anger, and anger, usually isn't a great thing. We don't want to be angry people. It's not something, that we're supposed to do, is be angry. But there's a different kind of anger that Jesus had. It was a righteous anger for reverence of God and respect for God. And he came into the temple, and he was angry by the way his Father's house was being treated. And I think we need to remember that man, how do we treat God's house, and how do we treat the church? How do we treat us? Because here's the thing, is that we know now that the house of God isn't a building. The church isn't a building, it's the people. And so I think he's just as passionate about us, the church, as people, as he was about the temple. And so it's a great reminder to make sure we are treating us and the church with reverence and with respect, and each other with respect, the way Jesus would want. The third thing is that he knew who he was. He knew who he was. He knew he was the Son of God. He knew what his mission was. He was aware of it very early on. He is speaking about it right here. We see, he says, man, destroy this temple and build it back in 3 days. I'm going to, prophesying his death and resurrection. He was very aware of who he was and the mission that he came to do. And so that's a powerful thing as well, because there's people that believe that Jesus was just a prophet, that Jesus wasn't the Son of God, that Jesus, that he was just a madman. But we see here that the thing, he was aware that he was the Son of God. He knew it, and we see that, and I think that's so key for us to remember those things. So I hope that this helped you today. I hope in chapter 2, as you read this today, that you'll get some things out of it. Share it in the comments. I would love to read them. And have a great day. God bless you guys.